Welcome to the Simply Real Life podcast. I'm Sarah, the founder of Simply Real Health, here to help you simplify, amplify, and elevate your life. This show is for those of you who want the real talk on how to live a more intuitive and intentional life, a life that's healthy from the inside out, and one that feels more effortless, aligned, simple, and more alive. We cover it all, from health, wellness, mindset, motherhood, daily habits and rituals, to business and relationships, creativity and growth, and tiny tricks to feeling your best, and the energetics behind it all filled with personal stories, unfiltered conversations, and of course, answering all of your burning questions, all in the way of simplicity and keeping it real, so that you can create your own version of your healthiest life. Let's do it. Hi guys, welcome back to the show this week. This question came in from multiple of you, I guess, a couple weeks ago when I did our Q&A day on Instagram. And I was actually very surprised by this question that people would even want to know this or are curious about this. But in today's episode, I want to share a little bit more about my plans for how I'm getting ready to give birth, my birth plans in general, just talking about the experience of birth, at least in the past experiences, and what I'm doing now to get ready with my body, my mind, my heart, my spirit, all of it in preparation for this huge life change. So let's jump right in. One of the questions that came in was, what is your birth plan? Like, what are you doing to get ready? What is your vision for how this is going to go? And laugh a little bit when I hear that, because it's not up to me. I just have always had this feeling around giving birth. It's such a spiritual experience that to me feels like it's all up to the baby. Looking back, having had 2 births already with my 2 kids, there are certain elements of each one where I'm like, wow, that really explains a lot about their personality. Just the way that they chose to come into the world explains so much. And so to me, it is this very open-ended experience. I hold it with an open palm because I have no idea. I am just the vessel here. I'm trying the best I can to listen to my body and what's going on and really try to tune in and feel a sense of a connection to my baby, which, by the way, I feel like for me, it doesn't really happen until later into 3rd trimester, where you're entering this birth portal. You get into the 30, 31, 32, 33 weeks, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is real. This child, not only can I feel them physically moving all night, squirming around, kicking, whatever it is, which is so amazing and so wild at the same time. We're like, there's a real person in there. And then there's always the countdown of, in this many weeks, I will have a baby in my arms and no longer in my body. And so I feel like because this is the 3rd time that I'm doing this, there is sort of a wisdom that I have around, I'm not really in control. Whatever way this plays out is how it's going to play out. And all I can do is be an open and willing participant in this. And so one of the first things I think that helps is you might have your ideals of what you would like it to be, or the experience that you would like to call in for yourself. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to be talking about that today too. And then also this mentality of, it's going to be what it is, and it's my job to really go with the flow. And there is so much about pregnancy, there is so much about motherhood in general that is about that act of surrender and the release of control. And so I do think there's this really interesting balance between the 2 worlds, if you will, and being able to draw what you can from both of those, your hopes, your dreams, having and holding the vision of what you do want, but also realizing the part of this that is meant to be is you will experience the birth that you are meant to have, or that this baby is wanting to have. So both things I think can be true at the same time. So let me back up for a little bit and I can explain about my past 2 births and experiences, because that impacts how I'm thinking about this 3rd one. So the first time I gave birth with Noah, I went into labor at 39 weeks. I was not expecting to go into labor early. I was just thinking that my body was probably going to be slower. My body just tends to be a little bit slower with most things. So I was thinking it was definitely going to be 40 weeks or maybe a little bit later. So it did catch me by surprise going into labor. One of the best things that we did was hire a doula. It's something that I would encourage, especially first time moms. I think probably every birth, if you can do it, that it is so worth it. It was something for Kyle and I where we're a little bit doubtful. Is this really worth it? I don't really know. I feel like he's a really supportive husband. He doesn't freak out in times of stress. I think he can be the support person, and maybe that's what we do. And I was almost, I think, a little bit worried of would he feel weird or bad that he's kind of being pushed aside if we did hire a doula. Anyway, long story short, it's so worth it. If you can do it, it is so worth it because there are so many different outcomes, different things that happen, different ways that things progress. And it's an entirely new world that no amount of reading, prep, birth classes can really help you know and experience. And there's something about having somebody there who knows, who has seen hundreds of different births, who know how things go, who has taken the time to get to know you and your style and your preferences and talking through different scenarios. If this happens, what would you like? If this happens, what would you like? What would be your preference? Because I can tell you when you are in that actual portal of giving birth, it is so hard to express what you need. It's so hard to know what's really going on, and having somebody there that is your advocate, especially I think for someone like me where my preferences are not going to be the norm of what is considered standard care. And that's just the way I live my life. That is true in any medical setting, is true with any type of doctor's appointment. I just know that I think a little bit differently about things. And so having somebody there was so invaluable. So in that first birth, I had quite a bit of back labor. So I went into labor naturally. We did the whole thing. We were doing exercises at home. And again, the doula helped us walk through all of that. We did some birth prep with her before the baby got there so Kyle could know what to do and when to be calling her. And it was a pretty positive experience, I would say. Overall, went into labor at home, stayed there as long as we could, and then getting in the car to go to the hospital, meet her there, things were really ramped up. And looking back now, it's because I had back labor. I had like the most intense, deep back labor with him, where it felt like every contraction, my spine was completely shattered. So there was no breaks. There was no such thing as breathing in between the contractions. Like there was no break. The contraction would come and then the shattering would last until the next contraction started. So it was a very intense process. It was something that took a long time. It wasn't like over a 48-hour experience. It was definitely under 8 or 9 hours total, which is pretty quick for a first birth. But the feeling and the experience in my body was that it was taking forever and it was painful and I had zero breaks. I remember that with his birth, I was trying to see, like, could I do it unmedicated? I wasn't against an epidural. And so finally the time came where I said, okay, I need that epidural just to get through this. I don't know how much longer this is going to last. I got an epidural and then immediately had a negative reaction to it, or Noah had a negative reaction to it. His heart rate dropped and it was kind of this panic moment. I remember like rising above my body for a little bit. They were kind of calling in all these nurses and like prepping the OR to maybe to go for a C-section. And I just remember floating above my body. I remember feeling that sense of God around me of like, this is going to be okay. Just breathe. This is going to be okay. And after that, it was like a whole different experience. The epidural kicked in. I could finally breathe. I could relax. I could be more present. And I think from the time I got the epidural to the time that he was born was under an hour. So I kind of got it at that point where it was a little bit too late. But I think because having a first birth where it was like this extreme intensity for long durations. Like I went without an epidural for 5, 6 hours. So had that full experience and then was so much more relaxed to be present in that moment. And I feel like that was a great fit for me at that time for exactly what was going down in that birth. That's how that went. With June, my daughter, it was very different. With June's, I was a little bit expecting a similar thing to happen, especially so with back labor, which turned out, hey, that's true. That's something that is fun for me. So that's how my births go. I definitely did have back labor again with her. It must be something just about the shape of my body or spine or whatever it may be. With her, I had done a lot more preparation in terms of meditation and visualization about the birth process and how could it go, and being in those moments of intensity, and knew what that was about, knew what it felt like, and wanted to see if I could do it without needing an epidural, because I had that sort of strange experience when I did get the epidural, and it caused this big panic moment in the birth, and we weren't sure if things were okay. So going into it, mentally thinking through like, well, if I can do it again, let's see how long I can go. I'm not opposed to getting an epidural, and maybe I want to do it like that. I can be more relaxed and have my hair flip moment. Okay, I can do this now. With her, I went into prodromal labor the week before she was born. So what that means is that your body basically starts having contractions, and this was around 39 weeks. So I was thinking, based on Noah's timing, 39 weeks is when I was ready. And so around that same time, I started having contractions. We were getting ready. We had our bags packed. I was calling my parents and trying to be laboring at home, especially in that beginning period of time. But then after an hour or two, the contractions slowed down and then they went away. And so it was actually a full week from the time that those contractions started to the time that I went into actual labor. It was a strange zone to be in mentally, where you're like, I think I'm about to give birth, but not really sure, because I'm just waiting for my body to go and kick into gear with contractions. And it was a very strange mental state to be in that week of like, is it going to be tonight? Is it going to be today? Is it going to be this? Like just having backup plans and care set up just for that entire week, thinking that every day could be the day. And then turns out the blessing though of that is that my body was naturally progressing, meaning that I was in the process of labor, even though it was not intense labor. So by the time I did feel contractions and was ready to go to the hospital, which we had the same doula that I had for Noah, which was so, so helpful. She knew my body. She knew about the back labor. She knew everything about my previous birth. And she had told me when we were in that week of waiting to see what was going to happen, she said, when you do get the contractions, I would suggest going to the hospital earlier, just because your body has already been working at this. You've already been dilating, like your body's going to be kind of ready to go. So make sure you don't wait too long. So by the time those contractions did hit, for her, it was like exactly on her due date, of course, just exactly at 40 weeks. And this peaceful drive, and we parked, walked her in, and from the time I got into the birth room, it was less than an hour until she was out. No epidural, nothing. It was peaceful, and then it really just ramped all of a sudden and hit like crazy. And it was the most intense thing I have ever experienced. Like I have shared with friends, it almost feels like a death. You feel like you're just floating above your body. It is that much physical pain and intensity, like you'd almost leave your body. And then it was over very quick. No medication, no epidural. I will say that my recovery after that birth was incredibly faster and felt so much better without the epidural. So it's my hope this time that maybe I could do it again without the epidural, because I just felt so much better. The recovery was so much quicker, but we'll see. I have this open-ended palm with this. We're going to see how it goes. But that would be my ideal, the intention and the vision that I'm holding for myself, that it could also be a labor that was quick and relatively easy in terms of no complications and unmedicated. Yes, I did have that same back labor, but because the window of time was condensed, it just felt so much more doable. I guess I should have said maybe in the beginning of the episode that my plan for birth is to give birth in a hospital with midwives. It's kind of like a blend to me that feels the best of having that backup care, having the NICU there in case things needed to go or progress in a way of a C-section, especially because of my experience with my first birth. If I was to do that at home, if I was in a different place, that would have completely freaked me out. So to me, this has felt like a great blend of the resources there and in case of emergency, but also the experience of seeing a midwife. They're a little bit more naturally minded and less Western medical only points of view on things. And I've had great experiences in doing that. It feels like a really good fit for me. But I think for every person, it is a little bit different, like what you feel comfortable with. I think it's amazing when people want to do birth in a birth center. There's a really big trend of going back to wanting to do it at home. I have no desire to give birth at home. I don't know, you would maybe think that I would because of how I think about a lot of things, but I just have no desire to do that. I want to be in a separate space. I don't want to be in my home. I want my home to be someplace I come back to. There's just so many different things. And there are downsides, things I don't love. I don't like hospitals. I hate the smell of them. I hate the feel of them. But it feels like the best of both worlds in that sense. I think that's definitely something that's different for everyone. And you just have to really listen to what feels good to you and what feels like the most supportive type of environment to be giving birth in, because it's a really big deal how you feel about your care and about your support and what type of hands that you are in. So in terms of other things I'm doing, because that was also part of the question, like, what are you doing? What are you focused on? I am continuing with my foam rolling every morning. I mean, this is something I do no matter what, if I'm pregnant or not, but it just feels like, especially towards the end of pregnancy, that you're holding tension in different places. Your body mechanics are just different. So doing foam rolling all down my legs, my hips, my back, arms, releasing tension, because I also have a really big focus on trying to walk as much as I can. Granted, that's going to be much more like 3 mini walks a day instead of 1 longer walk, which is normally my preference. But just because of the way that your pelvis changes and your center of gravity, it gets a little bit more uncomfortable to be walking for long distances. And then when the baby does drop, there's that heaviness feeling. So my plan is to just keep walking till I can't, which is what I did for both other babies. And I felt like that really helped physically for birth, but also mentally, having a little bit of solo time to be thinking about things. And granted, now it looks very different because it's one walk will be super early in the morning before my kids are up. One walk might be around or after lunch. And then the third walk is always with our kids or doing a bike ride, or it's not just me going on a walk. We also have this very big emphasis right now on strength. I think this would be great normally in pregnancy, but especially so for me because I was bedridden for so long that I really did lose all of my muscle. And I know that how physical birth can be, especially if you're wanting or having the dream of maybe doing it without an epidural or without tons of medication, that it requires you to be very strong, to be squatting and holding positions longer. And just having that strength is something that I feel like was so helpful that I did before giving birth to June, that I didn't really do or wasn't really thinking about with Noah. I feel like I've learned some things along the way, and also helps with recovery and helps you feel better post-birth when you still have muscle. And it's so much easier to pick up being active and to pick up a workout routine after if things haven't completely atrophied. So right now my plan has been, I know that I've talked about this before, but really focusing on TRX. That feels so good being pregnant. There's the cables that you hang over the door, and you can do so much with strengthening, but also stretching at the same time. And it's really supportive. Like you can do a low squat, but you're holding onto something to help pull you up. When your joints get all loose and crazy towards the end with all the relaxin and all your hormones changing, that has been a great way to do strength. And then doing some weights here and there. But between that and trying to keep up with Pilates on the reformer, just doing it twice a week. I'm not doing anything crazy, but being on the reformer, to me, it just feels very supportive of joints and alignment. And it's very easy to adjust how I feel versus me trying to free form exercises or do exercises with heavy weights. I just know the state of my body is in a loose, open place as it should be for birth. And so between the strength with the weights and the TRX and the Pilates and doing the walking, I need the foam rolling every day. Those have all been part of my weekly and or daily routine, as well as trying to focus a lot on getting as much nourishment as I can into my body. I know that some people in pregnancy, especially the third trimester, they're just like, I'm just going to let it all go. Like, who cares? I'm just going to eat ice cream and eat whatever I want. And to me, it's so different because I never really experienced hunger or a really deep desire for food the whole time that I'm pregnant. But at least in the last part of third trimester, I can at least stand the thought of food, and I can usually stomach more things than I've ever been able to the rest of the pregnancy. So trying to get an emphasis of protein, having protein at every meal, setting up my blood sugar in a really balanced way, and getting as many nutrients as I can. And knowing too that for me, the hunger comes back when I am nursing, and it comes back with this vengeance that I love, and eating becomes so fun again. And in this stage right now, it's so much more just about function and nutrition and trying to catch up for lost time for sure. So a lot of smoothies, a lot more protein, iron, thinking about all the things that are helpful when you do eventually give birth. So those are all things that I am prioritizing right now. I talked a little bit about doing meditations, but as it gets towards the end, I really do like spending that time to take an afternoon nap, using that time to do a meditation, and one that's maybe more specifically focused on birth or connecting with your baby and getting in the mindset, because birth really is a mind-body thing. And I have learned so much more about this over the last 5 or 6 years and doing this a few times, that it is incredibly powerful. The thoughts you're thinking, the stories you're telling yourself, like, oh, this happened last time, so this will probably happen this time. That's actually not really a helpful thought. As best as I can, trying to take some time every day to get in that calm, peaceful, grounded state so that it's hopefully something that I can return back to when I am in the moments of intensity and maybe the hours of intensity. So almost like priming my brain for that and really practicing dropping into that and dropping into it quickly. And the things that I do want to be thinking about in terms of my body and the baby and working together, the two of us. So that's definitely a priority too. Two last other things I would say, the things that I'm really, really, really glad that I did last time that I wish I did the first time was that closer to that 39-week mark, or whenever you would feel comfortable actually giving birth, if it happened, because this can sometimes trigger labor, was to start pumping around that 39th week to get colostrum. And what I did is I just bought a bunch of syringes on Amazon because it's such a small amount that would come out. You can do hand expressing or you can try to pump, but I got I don't know, 10 to 12 syringes if I worked really hard at it that last week or two of colostrum, which then is that's what the baby relies on for its first couple of days of life. And for me, because with Noah, my milk didn't come in for a long time, like a full week. And I could do a whole podcast on that and what happened there and the things I've learned about nursing in itself. But when I did that, it felt like my milk came in so much easier for June. And two, I was able to bring that colostrum to the hospital so that there was actually less pressure on me after birth. Okay, mom, let's get your colostrum out to give to the baby. So it just made it less stressful knowing that we had tons of syringes ready to go already. We brought them on ice, I want to say, or like in a little cooler or something, to the hospital. And then also had some in our freezer for the first couple weeks of life. And then I was able to keep some even for the first time that she got sick. I'm so glad that I did that. That was something really simple to do that last week when you're waiting and it could be any day now. But I also think it really helped with milk production and having my milk come in a little sooner. So that's something I am planning to do again. So with Noah, I had a really hard time getting my milk to come in, and it always felt like it wasn't quite enough. And I was feeding him and then pumping every single time after I fed him to try and get my supply up. And so I'm really aware of milk supply. But what I did with June was rented a hospital pump, and a hospital grade pump is so much stronger than any pump on the market. Like nothing else worked for me with Noah besides the hospital pump. So if you are listening to this, plant that in your mind. You can rent them from the hospital. They're these big things, but man, they work so much better. So with June, I also rented the hospital pump, but I ended up only really using it for 2 or maybe 3 months after. And I just was like a pumping machine when I could, because granted, I already had another kid, and it's much harder to be pumping every single time when you have other kids around and needing your time and needing your attention. But I focused on it for 2 or 3 months and built up this supply, which then helped for the entire first year of her life to have that in the freezer. And the mentality of that, it was just peace of mind, I think. And in those first 3 months, that's so doable. That can be my job for 3 months, is working on that stash. So that was something that I'm like, I'm going to try to do that again. Granted, every time is a little bit different, or your body's a little bit different, who knows? But that was something that I do feel like looking back was a really helpful thing of not having the mentality I'll have to do this for an entire year, but taking a couple months of focusing just on that and then getting into a schedule where I actually didn't end up pumping pretty much at all after that because we were in such a good flow with nursing. So those are my plans, my thoughts as I enter this birth portal and start thinking through what this is going to look like and what do I want it to look like? What are the parts that I want to take with me from my lived experience? And then what are the things that I'm open to being different, open to working a little bit more on, drawing a little bit more of the mind-body connection, the energetics behind it, the physical part, and how that's connected to our thoughts. And I'm curious about that. So that's something I'm definitely going to be experimenting with. So keep y'all posted how it does all end up going down. I just have a lot of hopes for it being a healthy and a smooth labor, and whatever that looks like is okay. But having that intention and hope and really thinking through this in terms of something I'm excited to do and that I know my body can do, and trusting the process in all of it. So I hope that this was helpful to hear, especially if you are in this season or going to be soon or wanting to be in it soon, just a little bit behind the scenes of what does go on in your head as you get to this really exciting and really special stage. If you have any questions at all about any of the things I talked about, come over and find me at Simply Real Health on Instagram. I love you guys so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. If you enjoyed this episode and want more like it, make sure you're subscribed to the Simply Real Life podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe share it with a friend or two. That would mean the world.